This is episode 3 of a series in which we explore each and every Mario Kart 8 track in search of hidden details. Today we're going to move from the Flower Cup to the Star Cup. Let's see what we missed while racing through these tracks. Let's start things off with the Sunshine Airport. This is one of the most interesting tracks we've looked at so far. It's a tropical airport, if that's a thing. Let's head inside. As somebody who has messed around with 3D modeling, I am really blown away by how good this interior looks. There's so many mindful details and intricacies that make this place so interesting to look at. And covering the walls of this already awesome room are dozens of signs, some of which we haven't seen before. 3 of these new brands are airlines, like Galaxy Air, PAL, whatever that stands for, and Boomerang Bros International Airlines. We also have a few advertisements for other tracks that have been run by Galaxy Air. But one of my favorite things in here are the suitcases covered in travel stickers. You'll notice that one of these stickers is a logo for something called Propeller Towed Transport, which seems to be another travel company. Probably the most interesting things to look at inside of the airport are these digital airline signs. They tell you the departure and landing time, the name of the airline, the plane number, and the destination. We can see that the closest location is Cheep Cheep Beach, since it's only a 30-minute flight. And the furthest location is Sherbet Land, which is a 7-hour, 10-minute flight. It actually makes sense that Cheep Cheep Beach would be close to this tropical environment, and Sherbet Land would be far away. It's pretty insane that much thought went into these departure and landing times. And underneath these signs are monitors, which actually have little logos on them. And some little card things, all of which seem to have a very poorly written E or a decently well written 2. If we take a look outside, we can find that Propeller Towed Transport logo all over these crates and equipment. We can also see airplanes each bearing the name of one of the previously mentioned airline brands. But the Propeller Towed Transport plane is shaped differently, and it seems to be only for carrying cargo. So I think this company transports goods and supplies airport equipment. And something that you don't see in this model from NoClip.website is the super awesome Mario-themed airplane. These airplane models are very impressive, but I have to say, I don't trust an airplane with weird racetrack wings. Matter of fact, flying from this place would probably be quite a nightmare. You need to cross a racetrack every time you want to go to the bathroom, and don't count on any of your stowaway luggage surviving the racers. Not to mention, airports are just great, right? You sit around waiting in line, then you have to speedrun security any percent without accidentally bringing a bomb or a Zweihander or something. Then once you arrive at your gate, you're like 3 days early, so that's where you live until your flight arrives. And then, guess what? You're on a plane now, which has twice as many seats as it should. Plus, you usually can't see out of your window because everyone ends up getting 2 half windows. They can't line the seats up with the windows, but you know what? I'm sure they figured out how to keep this 400,000-pound sarcophagus from careening down to the earth. But anyways, this track isn't just a unique airport, there are things to see even in the ocean. These islands may not look like much from the ground, but from the sky, there are a few of them that are in the shape of stars. And on the other side of the airport is an island with some strange stone Koopa statues. I'm not sure I've ever seen these in a Mario game, but they're super cool. Well, that's pretty much everything there is to see here. Let's take a 55-minute flight to our next track, Dolphin Shoals. This is another tropical track, but this time with more of a water theme. As pretty as this track is, there's not much I can show you that you haven't already noticed. This dolphin rock formation is cool, and so is this volcano or whatever it is. And I'm sure you've noticed the giant swirling vortex. The detail work in Dolphin Shoals is really front and center. Without much to talk about, we head from this tropical paradise to the next track, Electrodome. This track looks ugly. Well, in-game it's one of the most visually striking tracks, but it relies too much on its animation and lighting to really look good at all here on NoClip.website. And again, most of the details are things you've probably already noticed, like this floor area saying Star Cup. But there are 2 interesting signs to look at. The first is for a company called Larry Lights, who I assume has supplied this place with all of its currently absent pretty lighting. And actually, if you look at this little animation closely, the DJ looks like Larry. Then we have another sign for a company called Roy Smooth Sounds. We saw them on the speakers in Mario Kart Stadium. Well, those 2 tracks sorta struck out. Hopefully Mount Wario is a bit more explorable. If you're familiar at all with Mount Wario, you won't be surprised to hear that this is, again, one of the most interesting tracks in the game. Instead of being a closed loop, this is a continuous path winding down a mountain. It brings you through a cave, along the wall of a dam, across a forest, and it finally concludes at the bottom of a skiing slope hill thing, surrounded by a village of snow-covered lodges. Let's start at the top and see what we find on the way down. Inside the tunnel, there are a couple of walkways that each lead to doors. These little secret passageways connect to the entrance of Wario Dam. I love the pipes and doors everywhere. The intricacy of the architecture is just really fun to look at. After we go through there, we end up on the wall of the dam. From here, we can see a huge wall covered in totally needless details, since I'm pretty sure you can't even see this without driving in the wrong direction. And the dam also has some walkways which cleverly act as walls to guide the player out to the forest. Well, this doesn't really look like a forest. Tunguska, maybe. In the game, this is a forest full of trees, and you get to take your own path through. Once we're on this hill, we start to see some skiing stuff, like this cabin. There isn't anything inside, but it's still neat. And this ski pole line tower is worth looking at too. If you pay close attention, this W shape has been highlighted purple, and there's some yellow on there too. I really like how this is subtly Wario themed. And if we keep going downhill, we come across some snowboards sticking out of the ground like it's the arena of a snowboard-wielding Dark Souls boss. We can also see some familiar brand names, but there are even more of them up here in this weird blue skiing-related building. Bullet Bill Speed Trial and 100% Organic Antifreeze are brands that haven't showed up until just now. And we did see Dream Gliders in Mario Circuit, but this sign is different than the one we saw there. And even cooler yet are the hot air balloons. These represent a few of the teams that we saw first pop up in Mario Kart Stadium, but this time we can see a new team called Wario Billionaires. And it looks like we get to see more of Galaxy Air here too. And finally, at the bottom of this hill, we're greeted by a crowd of cheering PNG sequences. Or maybe they're GIFs, but either way, they're funny and flat. And of course, how could you not look at the big Skyrim buildings? This top room gives a great view. It's probably the most expensive room. And by that logic, I'm guessing that this room is free. I also like this single stone tower. It isn't attached to any building, but it's still a cool implication that adds some life to this scene. Oh, and I just want to say, these mountains look creepy to me for some reason. They almost look normal, but they're just unnatural enough to be unsettling. Well, that's Mount Wario, and all of the Star Cup. Only 2 of these tracks were worth exploring in depth, but they're all great demonstrations of Nintendo's mastery in constructing vibrant and fun worlds. Anyways, I appreciate you watching. Thanks.